Okay, so let's unpack this. We are diving deep into the mind and compiled wisdom of Naval Ravikant. If you've spent any time online, you've probably come across his insights on building a life that, harmonizes success with inner peace.
That's right. And the source material guiding our deep dive today is, well, it's an almanac that gathers his key ideas. It draws from his huge output on Twitter, podcasts, interviews. Think of it like a distilled guide focusing on wealth, happiness, and wisdom. The specific material you shared comes from the Almanac de Naval Ravikant, Guía Práctica para Riqueza, Felicidad y Sabiduría.
Exactly. So our mission here is really to cut through the noise and pull out the most important practical nuggets from this guy. We want to help you understand the fundamental principles Naval suggests, and maybe more importantly, the actual actions he points to for building what he sees as a truly full and productive life.
hmm And the almanac itself gives us a pretty natural structure. It moves from foundational principles into specific areas. So understanding key principles, then learning to cultivate happiness, developing healthy habits, adopting continuous learning, and improving relationships and self-knowledge will basically follow that flow.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start right at the foundation, Naval's definition of wealth, because this is crucial, and it's probably different from what many people initially think. He makes a really sharp distinction. Wealth is not just having loads of money.
Right. And what's fascinating is the why behind that. Money, he says, is just a way to transfer time and value. Wealth, in his view, is different. It's owning assets,
Right.
things like businesses, intellectual property, investments, stuff that generates value without needing your constant hourly input.
Oh, okay.
These are things working for you, ideally even while you're sleeping.
Yeah. It's about owning equity, right? Building systems, creating things that scale beyond your personal time budget. And a massive piece of this, which the source really highlights, is leverage. This is where it gets really interesting.
Hmm.
Naval talks about using capital or technology or even the work of others to dramatically multiply your efforts, your impact.
Leverage is absolutely fundamental, especially for creating significant wealth today. It goes way beyond just earning a high salary by trading your time. Your output isn't tied to your physical presence or the hours you put in.
Makes sense.
And the Almanac also stresses needing a dual skill set. You need to learn both how to create something valuable and how to sell, meaning, how to distribute that value, convince people it's worthwhile. You really need both.
Both sides of the coin. And kind of counterintuitively, he emphasizes actively avoiding competition. Instead of that head-to-head fight for the same market share, the advice is more like find or build a unique niche. Create something so specific to your skills, your personality, your interests, that you are the best because you're the only one doing exactly that.
Precisely. It's about building unique knowledge or maybe unique brand identity. And the Almanac gives practical examples that fit this idea, like creating a digital product, a course, an ebook, software that uses technology leverage,
Right.
or investing in broad market indices like the S&P 500, or even carefully picking some early startups. Those are ways to use capital leverage. Your money works to scale your piece of the economy's growth.
Okay, so let's pull that together for a second. What does this different view of wealth mean for you listening right now?
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just chasing a bigger paycheck to maybe building things that hold value separate from your time. How could you start thinking about leverage maybe through tech or systems or collaboration in your own goals, even if they aren't purely about money?
That's a great question. And moving on from, let's say, the external side of wealth, the Almanac puts huge, maybe even greater emphasis on cultivating happiness,
Hmm.
achieving peace of mind. Yeah, and this feels deeply personal. Naval frames happiness not as like a destination you arrive at or something external circumstances give you, but more as a fundamental internal state, almost a decision you cultivate through practice.
Which raises the big question. If it's not about external results, then how do you cultivate it? The source points very strongly to practices, things you do. And central to Naval's own routine and his whole philosophy is the role of meditation, finding silence.
Mm-hmm.
He advocates for doing it daily, suggesting that even just 10 to 20 minutes can be, well, transformative. The Almanac mentions resources like meditation apps, as accessible tools to get started. It's really about creating space away from that constant mental noise.
Yeah, just finding those moments of quiet stillness. It's hard in a world that's always demanding your attention, isn't it?
Totally.
Another powerful concept from the source, and this one's borrowed from ancient wisdom, is desire equals suffering. The idea being that a lot of our unhappiness doesn't come from what we lack, but from the desire itself. wanting things we don't have, possessions, outcomes, validation.
Right.
So reducing that attachment, that desire, is presented as a direct path towards peace.
Letting go of those external hooks, those
Yeah.
expectations, yeah.
Yeah.
And a very simple, very practical action suggested is practicing daily gratitude.
Ah.
The Almanac specifically recommends writing down, say, 3 things you are grateful for each day. It actively shifts your focus from what you think is missing to appreciating what's already there.
It's simple, but effective. So thinking about this, how can you start viewing happiness less as a goal that depends on what happens outside and more as an internal state you can influence right now? What small step towards, say, finding a few minutes of silence or practicing gratitude, or maybe just noticing a strong desire without immediately acting on it? What could you try today?
Good prompts.
Yeah.
And the Almanac then grounds these ideas in our physical reality. It digs into the importance of developing healthy habits. And these aren't just about fitness. They're presented as absolutely crucial for having the energy and the mental clarity needed for everything else we've discussed.
The bedrock, basically. Daily exercise is framed as non-negotiable, whether it's weights, yoga, cardio, whatever, just consistent movement. It fuels the engine that powers your ability to build, create, think clearly, all of it.
And a simple, clean diet is also recommended. Cutting back on processed foods, focusing on more natural stuff, fueling your body efficiently really impacts everything, from your mood to how well you think.
Totally. And then there's what the source calls sacred sleep, getting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep consistently. It's not a luxury. It's framed as essential maintenance for peak physical and mental performance.
Right. And while none of these habits are exactly earth-shattering on their own, we've heard them before, Naval's framework really emphasizes how fundamental they are and how interconnected.
Yeah.
The practical actions suggested include things like establishing a consistent training routine, something sustainable, something you can actually stick with, and maybe considering dietary approaches like intermittent fasting. The 16.8 method is mentioned fasting 16 hours, eating in an 8-hour window for potential metabolic benefits.
Okay. So thinking about your own energy, your overall well-being, which foundational habit, exercise, diet, or sleep feels like the most critical area for you to maybe prioritize right now to build that physical base?
From the physical, we move to the mental. Continuous learning is highlighted as another core pillar for growth, but it's focused on building deep, fundamental understanding, not just surface-level knowledge or chasing the latest trends.
Yeah, this means prioritizing reading fundamental books, timeless works, philosophy, science, business things that actually change how you see the world. The Almanac mentions specific examples, like the Bhagavad Gita or Sapiens, not just as interesting reads, but as sources of deep systemic knowledge that give you perspective.
And what's particularly insightful here, I think, is the principle of teaching what you learn. Just consuming information isn't really enough. The act of explaining it or sharing what you've learned, it forces you to organize your thoughts. You spot the gaps in your own understanding. And it solidifies the knowledge in a way that just passively reading doesn't. It reinforces that learning loop, something honestly we try to do right here in these deep dives.
It really does deepen your own grasp, you're right. And just as important as consuming the right information is actively avoiding the wrong kind. The advice is pretty clear. Steer clear of those toxic news cycles, addictive social media feeds that just clutter your mind, trigger negative emotions, and kind of distort your view of reality.
Absolutely. So the practical actions here are pretty straightforward. Maybe commit to reading for a set time each day, say 30 minutes. And make an effort to process and share what you learn. Could be notes, a blog, social media, or even just talking about it with friends.
So how could you maybe integrate reading fundamental ideas into your daily or weekly routine? And where could you start that practice of sharing or explaining what you've learned to deepen your own understanding?
Good questions. And finally, the Almanac brings it all back to our connections with others and with ourselves, relationships, and authenticity. The people you surround yourself with, they significantly shape your life.
Yeah, there's that powerful, often quoted idea. You are the average of your 5 closest people. The source uses this not as like a strict formula, but to emphasize the huge impact of your social environment.
Right.
It encourages consciously spending time with people who inspire you, who support your growth, lift your spirits.
And in terms of cultivating healthy relationships, the principle of unconditional love comes up, focusing on basing connections on freedom and acceptance,
Mhm.
rather than trying to control or manage people or having really rigid expectations. It's about allowing people, including yourself, to just be authentic.
Mm-hmm. And this authenticity piece ties into the practical action of practice of radical honesty, which doesn't mean being carelessly blunt, right? But communicating directly, truthfully, even when it's uncomfortable. It fosters real trust and clarity. And this might also mean honestly evaluating your current social circle, maybe setting boundaries or limiting time with people who are genuinely toxic and just drain your energy.
That makes sense. So thinking about your own life, who are the people who genuinely lift you up, who support your best self? And where could bringing maybe a little more honesty with kindness, with intention into your communication, potentially improve a key relationship?
So we've covered a lot. Wealth, happiness, habits, learning, relationships, the core pillars, according to this almanac. But it doesn't just list them, right? It synthesizes them. It shows how they build on each other and connect to these bigger life goals.
Right. The source kind of concludes by framing these principles as building blocks towards, sustainable wealth through value creation,
Hmm.
intentional happiness through practices like meditation and detachment, a strong physical base from healthy habits, continuous growth through learning, and meaningful connections built on authenticity.
And it lays out some aspirational goals across different time frames, all driven by these principles. Short term, maybe within a year. Focus on implementing maybe 3 key foundational habits like consistent meditation, reading, exercise, and identifying a specific passive income source or a value creation project to actually start building.
Then medium term, say 3 to 5 years. Aiming for partial financial independence through those assets we talked about, scalable businesses, while also really mastering fundamental, timeless skills like sales, critical thinking, understanding tech.
And then the long term, 10 years plus, achieving true geographic and economic freedom, the ability to live and work from anywhere on your own terms.
Crucially, while maintaining that internal balance success with inner peace.
Yeah, that balance is key.
So you can see how the seemingly simple daily practices, the consistent learning, the focus on creating value, they're presented not just as isolated tips. They're the foundational work that compounds over time, building towards those significant longer-term goals of freedom and fulfillment.
Right. And bringing it right back to the immediate, the almanac is very clear on this. You don't need to overhaul your entire life today. It suggests explicit actions you can take right now.
Yes, exactly. It lists 3 specific steps to just get started on this path. First, choose just one habit from the list we discussed, maybe meditating for just 10 minutes, and commit to doing it today.
Just one. Okay. Second, identify a passive income source you could potentially start working on. Could be as simple as just outlining that ebook idea you've had
Yeah.
or researching platforms for digital products. Just identify it.
And third, pick up a classic fundamental book and read just 10 pages.
10 pages.
Look down.
Small, concrete steps to begin building in these key areas. And the almanac wraps up with a really powerful quote that kind of encapsulates the ultimate aim of this whole framework. It's from Naval himself. La riqueza es la libertad de despertarte cada día y decidir qué hacer con tu tiempo.
Which translates roughly to, wealth is the freedom to wake up every day and decide what to do with your time.
That says a lot.
It really does. So this deep dive, it's taken us through the core practical insights compiled in that Naval Ravikant Almanac, covering everything from building assets that work for you to cultivating an internal state of peace, reinforcing the body, expanding the mind, and nurturing genuine connections.
Yeah, it offers a really holistic vision of success, one that intertwines that external achievement with internal well-being. And based on everything we've explored from this guide, the principles around wealth, cultivating happiness, building strong habits, embracing continuous learning, and nurturing authentic relationships. Here's the final question for you to consider. In which of these fundamental areas, wealth, happiness, habits, learning, or relationships, do you feel called to deepen your focus and maybe take one small actionable step right now?